certain verses in the New Testament give a clue as to what false ideas Paul and the apostles were trying to correct. Acts 13, verse 39. And by him, Christ, all that believe are justified from all things, from which you could not be justified by the law of Moses. That's Acts 13, verse 39. So there were people that thought they could be justified by the law of Moses. That was the issue. He was trying to show that, no, you're justified by belief, not by the law of Moses. The Ten Commandments was not the issue. If you go to Acts 15, verse 1, what was the issue there? And certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren and said, unless you keep the commandments, you cannot be saved. No, it's not what it says. Certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren and said, except you be circumcised after the manner of Moses, you cannot be saved. Circumcision for adult Gentile converts was the issue. Go down to verse 5. But there rose up certain of the sect of the Pharisees which believed, saying that it was needful to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moses. Now, the law, the Ten Commandments, was spoken by God and written with the finger of God on tablets of stone. The law of Moses was written by Joshua on whole stones. There was a difference. If you go to Joshua 8, verse 32, and he wrote there upon the stones a copy of the law of Moses, which he wrote in the presence of the children of Israel. So there was a difference between the law of Moses, which was written by Joshua on whole stones, and the Ten Commandments, which was spoken by the Lord to the people and written with the finger of God. Not that there was anything wrong with the law of Moses. Christ quoted it 3 times when he was tempted by the devil, but it's not the same thing as the Ten Commandments. Many of the provisions of the law of Moses do not apply today. For example, we have our own criminal penalties in this country. And for example, you don't have to put a parapet around your roof today. People aren't going from house to house on rooftops. But the principle that we should take care of our property and make sure it's safe does apply. But anyway, the issue in Acts 15 was those who said Gentile converts had to be physically circumcised and keep the law of Moses. It wasn't whether they have to keep the Ten Commandments. That was never the issue. What was the issue in Galatians? In Galatians, what was the issue? Knowing that a man is not justified by works of law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ, even we have believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by the faith of Christ, and not by works of law. For by works of law shall no flesh be justified. That's Galatians 2, verse 16. It shouldn't be the works of the law. The these shouldn't be there. Bullinger's Companion Bible makes that point, and you can go study the Greek and see. It should be works of law. Physical works, physical effort of law, ergon namu. The issue clearly was those who thought they could be justified by works of law, justify themselves by works of law. That was the issue in Galatians, not whether to keep the Ten Commandments. Galatians 5, verse 4, New Living Translation. Listen to this. This is the issue. Galatians 5, verse 4, New Living Translation. For if you are trying to make yourselves right with God by keeping the law, you have been cut off from Christ. You have fallen away from God's grace. The problem wasn't they were keeping God's law. The problem was they were trying to make themselves right by works of law and not by the faith of Christ. What would the issue be in the end time? Well, Christ said quite clearly in Matthew 24, verse 12, and because lawlessness, anomia, will abound, the love of many will grow cold. So Christ knew lawlessness would be the problem. The problem in Paul's day was those who thought they could justify themselves by works of law, and that said you had to be physically circumcised if you were a Gentile. But the problem in the end time, according to Christ, would be lawlessness. And according to Paul as well, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, start in verse 7. This is New King James Version. For the mystery of obedience to God is for the mystery of lawlessness, anomia, is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. We have to love the truth. So Paul knew it was the mystery of lawlessness that would happen, that would culminate in the end time. Then you'd have the coming of the lawless one. you see. The last surviving of the 12 apostles, John, what did he think the problem would be in the end time? Well, what did he think the problem would be in his time, I should say? 1 John 2, well, he knew it would be a problem in the end time as well if he heard Christ say, Matthew 24, verse 12. But listen to this. Why did he feel a need to write this? 1 John 2, verse 3. And hereby we do know that we know him, if we keep his commandments. Verse 4. He that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments, is a liar, and the truth is not in him. 1 John 5, verses 2 through 3. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous or burdensome. So, summing up, we see in Acts 13 and Acts 15, the problem was those who thought they could justify themselves by keeping the law of Moses, and those who said that Gentile converts had to be physically circumcised. In Galatians, we see the problem was those who thought they could justify themselves, not with faith, but by works of law, ergon namu. However, Christ said lawlessness would abound in the end time. We see the last surviving apostle wrote about the need to keep God's commandments. I wonder why. And Paul wrote about the mystery of lawlessness in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. It shouldn't be a surprise that people have perverted Paul's writings. If you read, I'm going to close with this. This is the New International Version. 2 Peter 3, start in verse 16, referring to Paul. He writes the same way in all his letters, speaking in them of these matters. His letters contain some things that are hard to understand, which ignorant and unstable people distort, as they do the other scriptures, to their own destruction. Therefore, dear friends, since you have been forewarned, be on your guard so that you may not be carried away by the error of the lawless and fall from your secure position. So, Peter warns that there will be those who would pervert Paul's teachings. The next verse, he says, don't be carried away by the error of the lawless. Interesting, don't you think? Peace.